Wife and I have been together for 20 years, married for 15. 3 kids from 14 to 9 years old. A few years ago, we were on the verge of divorce, but she was diagnosed with a degenerative disability that more or less put things into panic mode and restructured our entire dynamic. We've been working with counselors, individual and marriage, off and on trying to fix things however we can. The big sticking point that we keep coming back to is that I'm a doormat. I was raised by extremely controlling parents who modeled a terrible relationship. I'm a classic conflict avoider. It took me a lot of work to even be able to understand the concept of boundaries, and I still don't know how to implement them. The whole idea of boundaries is completely foreign to me. My wife grew up in a loud, angry family where she had to be aggressive to be heard and was allowed to do whatever she wanted. But she deals with a lot of anxiety and obsessive-compulsive disorder. This created a weird power imbalance for most of our marriage. If we disagreed, I would back down almost immediately. On the rare occasions when I felt strongly enough about something to hold my ground for a while, she would eventually break down in tears and I would give in to avoid being the bad guy. Very rarely did we compromise, usually on big purchases, house, car, etc. To avoid conflicts, I usually gave her what she wanted and just wouldn't tell her about the things I wanted or didn't want. This has led to a lot of resentment on both sides. The big thing our marriage counselor stressed recently was that I shouldn't be concerned about how my wife will react if I disagree. If she's going to be angry, that's her problem, not mine. That seemed logical and fine in the session, but I'm finding that I have no idea what that actually means in practice. For example, last night she asked if I could take the kids somewhere after school next week. I usually have a very flexible work schedule, but this particular day was one where I had to be at work. I told her no, I couldn't do it and apologized. Just a quick sorry. She became irritated that I apologized, not that I said no, and my gut reaction was to shut down and apologize for apologizing. But because I'm supposed to be more open and vulnerable and explain how I'm feeling without worrying about her action, I explained that in the past, she has often been angry if I'm unavailable due to work. That only made her more irritated, and she insisted that she rarely gets angry. It's my own trauma making me think that she's angry. She actually said that she walks on eggshells all the time to avoid making me angry because I'm the angry one, not her. I backed down immediately and just went to bed without saying anything else, which is generally how our arguments end. The next day, we just pretend it never happened and move on, building resentment the whole time. My wife and our counselor have both said that I shouldn't care how she feels and that I should express my emotions. But when I do, I feel like she's telling me that my emotions are wrong and or bad. I've tried telling her this before, but she just insists over and over again that she doesn't do that. And I'm just not expressing myself correctly and that I'm the angry one. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, you keep at it in counseling. Therapy isn't a magic cure-all. It takes work. My impressions based on what you've said here. She is allowed to have negative emotions. Not every emotion is directed toward you. She shouldn't take them out on you, for sure. But the fact that you recognize that she's irritated because of, say, a set in her shoulders or she purses her lips or something, is not a reason for you to shut down or get defensive. You accusing her of getting mad in the past did not help this situation. That was not communicating, that was just casting blame. Communicating would have been, I'm trying to work on not internalizing what I anticipate to be a potentially negative reaction. Not, you always get mad about X. That's toxic. She did not de-escalate the situation. You were accusatory, and instead of taking a step back to say, hey, that was unnecessary, she became defensive, and the whole argument spiraled. Just like you need to work on not shutting down, she needs to work on not being so reactionary. You're both unwilling to come back and apologize for your part of the argument after the fact. This is really the most critical piece right now. Deeply ingrained bad habits will still pop up in the heat of the moment. That's human. But after you've had a chance to cool down, you should reflect and come back together. Comment 2. She actually said that she walks on eggshells all the time to avoid making me angry because I'm the angry one, not her. The projection is palpable. Darvo. Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. Deny. She insisted that she rarely gets angry. What you observed is not happening. Attack. It's my own trauma making me think that she's angry. The problem is you, not me. Reverse victim and offender. She actually said that she walks on eggshells all the time to avoid making me angry because I'm the angry one, not her. And the Darvo is complete. The problem isn't that she is angry at you. The problem is that you are angry at her and she is the victim. The challenging part of this is that if you do go talk to a couple's therapist about it, she'll either refuse to acknowledge this happened or tell some fantasy story where you started in on her. Ask me how I know. Now for the update, thanks for reading the last post. So, a lot has happened in the past 3 days. After that argument about taking the kids somewhere, things got really tense between us. I tried to follow the counselor's advice and not worry about her reaction, but it felt like walking into a storm without an umbrella. I decided to stick to my guns and not apologize for apologizing, but it was hard. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had a knot in my stomach. I knew we had to talk about it, but I didn't know how to start. That day, I went to work and tried to focus, but my mind kept drifting back to our argument. I kept replaying it in my head, wondering if I could have handled it differently. During lunch, I got a call from my wife. She sounded calmer and asked if we could talk when I got home. I agreed, but I was nervous about what she was going to say. When I got home, she was waiting for me in the living room. The kids were at a friend's house, so we had some privacy. She started by saying that she had been thinking about what I said, and that maybe there was some truth to it. She admitted that she does get irritated when I'm unavailable, but she didn't realize how much it affected me. This was a big deal because she rarely admits to being wrong about anything. We talked for a while, and I tried to explain how I felt without backing down. It was tough, but I managed to get through it without apologizing for my feelings. She listened, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were actually communicating. She even apologized for getting irritated, which was a huge step for her. The next day, things seemed a bit better between us. We were more relaxed around each other, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I started to feel more confident about expressing my feelings, even if it meant she might get upset. That evening, we had another talk, and I told her about my fear of conflict and how it stems from my childhood. She listened and shared some of her own experiences growing up in a loud, angry family. It was eye-opening for both of us. On the third day, something happened that changed everything. I was at work when I got a call from my wife's doctor. They had some new test results and wanted to discuss them with both of us. I left work early and met her at the doctor's office. The news wasn't good. Her condition had worsened and they needed to adjust her treatment plan. It was a lot to take in, and we were both in shock. On the drive home, we were silent. I could see the fear in her eyes and I felt helpless. When we got home, we sat down and talked about what this meant for our family. We realized that we needed to be there for each other more than ever. This wasn't just about our marriage anymore. It was about our kids and our future. That night, we had a long talk about our relationship and what we needed to do to make it work. We both agreed that we needed to be more honest with each other and not let our pasts dictate our present. It was a turning point for us. We decided to start fresh and work on our communication skills together. The next day, I took the kids to school and had some time to think. I realized that I had been so focused on avoiding conflict that I had forgotten how to stand up for myself. I needed to find a balance between being assertive and being considerate of my wife's feelings. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined to make it work. Later that day, I had a session with my individual counselor. I told her about everything that had happened, and she helped me come up with some strategies for setting boundaries without feeling guilty. She also suggested that my wife and I attend a couples workshop to improve our communication skills. I brought it up with my wife that evening, and she agreed that it might be helpful. As we started to implement these changes, I noticed a shift in our relationship. We were more open with each other and less afraid of expressing our feelings. It wasn't perfect, and we still had our moments of tension, but it felt like we were finally moving in the right direction. One evening, while we were sitting on the porch, my wife shared a story from her childhood that I had never heard before. She talked about how her parents used to fight all the time and how she would hide in her room, feeling scared and alone. It made me realize that her aggressive behavior was a defense mechanism, a way to protect herself from getting hurt. It was a powerful moment, and it helped me understand her better. As we continued to work on our relationship, I started to see changes in myself as well. I was more confident and less afraid of conflict. I began to set boundaries at work and with my extended family, and it felt liberating. My wife noticed the changes too, and she was supportive, even when it was difficult for her. We still have a long way to go, but I feel hopeful for the first time in a long time. We're learning to navigate this new dynamic together, and it's bringing us closer. Our kids have noticed the difference too, and they seem happier and more relaxed. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for feeling like I'll never be enough? For my boyfriend. Because I'm white. I really need advice, insight from Black men specifically, but would appreciate advice from the Black community as a whole. I am a white woman dating a Black man. We have been together for 5 years. About 2 years ago, he tells me that he is not feeling seen and heard as a Black man in our relationship. It was super hard to hear, but we start having more conversations around race and our experiences, how it impacts our day-to-day lives, how it impacts our relationship, how it would impact our kids once we have them, things of that nature. Now, we've had a lot of fights since then where he is still feeling the same way. I try and do things every day. I go to therapy with a Black woman also in an interracial relationship for guidance, and am working on getting me and my boyfriend into therapy together. Last night I tell him that a few posts on his Facebook have essentially triggered me. I explain that I'm not accusing him of anything but was just feeling a way. He posted "love you" to 2 different women a few days apart. He has a history of cheating in person and online, so these things trigger me severely. I go on to explain that it's not just the post, but that he doesn't post about me. That it's not just the posts, but that I felt a little lonely lately as he doesn't show me much affection or intentional attention. We do live together and are with each other every day, so it's me just wanting intentional time with him. He thanks me for telling him what I was feeling, and we go to bed. This morning he asks me if I think I'm manipulative. I tell him no, and he says that I am. He says that he has said to me that he's felt lonely as a Black man, that he's trying to give back to the kids in our neighborhood, that it's weird that I'm attracted to him but don't want him using his looks for anything else, posting on social media. He tells me that respectfully he's settling, that if I was a Black woman, things would be easier, that white people have no reason to complain about anything, and that unless I'm opening my mouth to accommodate him or our dogs, I shouldn't open it. It's not the first time he's said these kinds of things. He said awful things, to be quite honest, but I know he's hurting and has felt disrespected. So he feels the need to disrespect back. I don't like it, but I'm trying to understand. Neither of us have any friends, just each other, and I'm so lost. I am so in love with him, and I'm doing whatever I can to make him happy. I wasn't trying to be manipulative with sharing with him. I wasn't trying to be a typical white person, as he says. My question is, essentially, will he always feel like he's settling no matter what I do? Will it never be enough because I can never have the exact knowledge and experiences a Black person would have? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Black man here. Please exit this relationship. You're being abused, and at the same time, your white guilt is being exploited. There is no reason why statements like, "As a Black man, I'm not feeling XYZ," should be used without objective context. There has to be a racially based scenario where he feels slighted and you can prove to be callous or insensitive. This isn't jerk who has picked up on all the social cues of how to make white people feel bad about themselves in relation to race. This is exactly the kind of Black person who actively reinforces stereotypes and encompasses all of it. Comment 2. As a Black woman, you are the one settling. You're settling for an insecure AH who's treating you like a second-class citizen and will blame the white man for every problem he has in his life. It's definitely okay for him to vent about injustices when circumstances dictate, but he's just being downright rude and disrespectful to you. You're not Black, so you will never understand the Black experience. But he knew this entering the relationship. He's wasting your time. There are so many other guys, of all races, who will respect and love you the way you deserve to be treated. Old boy sounds a bit unhinged. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the comments from my last post. I really need advice insight from Black men specifically, but would appreciate advice from the Black community as a whole. So, A lot has happened since my last update. After that conversation where he called me manipulative, things got really tense between us. We tried to go about our daily routines, but there was this underlying tension that neither of us could ignore. I kept going to therapy, and I even managed to convince him to join me for a couple of sessions. The first session was rough. He was very defensive and didn't want to open up. But by the second session, he started to share more about his feelings of loneliness and how he felt unseen in our relationship. One night, about 2 weeks ago, we had a huge fight. It started over something small. He left his dirty dishes in the sink again. I know it sounds trivial, but it was just the tipping point. I snapped and told him that I felt like he didn't care about our home or me. He fired back, saying that I was always nagging and never satisfied. The argument escalated quickly, and he ended up storming out of the house. He didn't come back until the next morning, and when he did, he looked exhausted and defeated. We sat down and had a long talk. He admitted that he had spent the night at a friend's place, someone I didn't even know he was still in contact with. This was a shock to me because, as I mentioned before, we don't really have any friends, just each other. He explained that he needed space to think, and that he felt suffocated in our relationship. He said he loved me, but wasn't sure if love was enough to overcome the racial and emotional barriers between us. This conversation forced me to confront some hard truths. I realized that I had been so focused on trying to make him happy that I had lost sight of my own needs and boundaries. I told him that I couldn't continue in a relationship where I felt disrespected and unloved. He looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw vulnerability in his eyes. He said he didn't want to lose me, but didn't know how to fix things. We decided to take a break. He moved out temporarily and went to stay with his friend. During this time, I continued my therapy sessions and did a lot of soul searching. I realized that I'd been walking on eggshells, trying to avoid triggering him. But in the process, I had been neglecting my own feelings and needs. I also started to understand that his feelings of loneliness and being unseen were deeply rooted in his experiences as a Black man in a predominantly white society. About a week into our break, he called me and asked if we could meet up and talk. We met at a park, and he looked different, more relaxed, but also more serious. He told me that he had been doing a lot of thinking and had even started seeing a therapist on his own. He apologized for the hurtful things he had said and admitted that he had been projecting his own insecurities and frustrations onto me. He said he wanted to work on himself and our relationship, but understood if I needed more time or if I wanted to end things. This was a turning point for me. I realized that while I loved him deeply, I couldn't continue in a relationship where I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells. I told him that I needed more time to think and that we both needed to focus on our individual growth before we could even consider getting back together. During this time, I also started to reflect on my own upbringing and how it had shaped my views on race and relationships. I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood and had very little exposure to different cultures. My parents were loving but somewhat ignorant when it came to issues of race. They always taught me to treat everyone equally, but they never really addressed the complexities of interracial relationships. I remembered an incident from my childhood that had always stuck with me. I was about 10 years old and a Black family had moved into our neighborhood. I became friends with their daughter, but my parents were always a bit wary. They never said anything overtly discriminatory, but there were subtle comments and looks that made me uncomfortable. I didn't understand it at the time, but looking back, I realized that those experiences had shaped my understanding of race and relationships in ways I hadn't fully acknowledged. As I continued to reflect, I also remembered a conversation I had with my grandmother when I was a teenager. She had grown up in the South during the Civil Rights Movement and had witnessed firsthand the struggles and injustices faced by Black people. She told me stories of bravery and resilience, but also of pain and suffering. Those stories had always inspired me, but I hadn't fully grasped their relevance to my own life and relationship. These reflections helped me understand that while I could never fully understand my boyfriend's experiences as a Black man, I could strive to be more empathetic and supportive. I realized that I needed to educate myself more about the history and struggles of Black people, and to be more proactive in addressing issues of race in our relationship. A few days ago, we met up again and had a long, heartfelt conversation. We both acknowledged our mistakes and expressed our desire to work on ourselves and our relationship. We decided to take things slow and to continue seeing our therapists individually. We also agreed to start couples therapy again once we felt more stable in our individual growth. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I do know that we both love each other and are committed to making things work. It's going to be a long and challenging journey, but I'm hopeful that we can come out stronger on the other side. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for cutting off my toxic ex-sister-in-law and refusing to help her? Even when my mom begged my brother, let's call him John, got together with his ex Jen about 4 years ago. Over the first year, they got married, got a house together, and had 2 kids. They are now near the end of a contentious divorce that dragged on over the last year and a half. Just trust me when I tell you, Jen is a terrible person. She makes every little comment anyone makes an attack against her, makes rude comments about everyone, and is just unpleasant to be around. Her own family does not talk to her, and she has no friends. My parents do not trust her or my brother to take care of their own kids, so they are very involved with them, watching them for 12 hours, 2/3 days a week, setting up doctors and physical therapy appointments for them, and generally take care of them as much, if not more, than each parent individually. There have also been multiple incidents where Jen, out of jealousy, has lashed out at my wife in person. And there was an incident about a year ago where my wife got a very mean text from Google Voice saying terrible things about her body. We are 1000% positive these texts came from Jen. At that time, my mom and brother made excuses for her and tried to say, well, we can't be sure, etc., and didn't take my wife's side. After that, we went no contact with Jen and do not attend any family events that she will be at. Fast forward to now. We have not seen or heard anything from Jen in over 6 months and are very happy with that. My mom calls me out of the blue yesterday and tells me that Jen wanted her to ask me if I could help her with something. Not going to get into details. I politely declined and insisted that Mom not call me with any requests like that from Jen again. Lo and behold, about 10:30 p.m. last night, my wife starts getting texts from random numbers with vulgar pictures and videos. Someone finally texts her and tells her that someone put her number on a 4chan meetup forum. Very nice timing. Nothing like this happens for over half a year, and the day I turned down a request from Jen, this happens. I called my mom the next day and told her what happened and asked her not to give my wife's new number to Jen. My mom immediately starts making excuses again, asking if it could have been this person or that thing, etc. At this point, I'm very disappointed, and my gut reaction is to pull back from my family a little bit. My mom babysits our 2-year-old daughter occasionally, and I'm seriously considering looking for an outside babysitter. I just can't believe she is not taking our side again on something that seems pretty cut and dry to me. It is very disrespectful to my wife at this point. Am I going too far? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Your mother is enabling an aggressor. It's time to find a babysitter and go no contact with your mom, as hard as that may be, because enablers stomp other people's boundaries when they're appeasing the aggressor. Once your mother experiences the consequences of her decisions, she might make changes, but don't count on it. Comment 2. What is the reason at this point that your mom is defending Jen? Jen is ugly to everyone and is in a contentious divorce with her son. What the expletive is going on? Does your mom not like your brother? I'm confused by your mom's motive in defending a, by all accounts, terrible person over her own family. Now for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since the last post. So after that incident with the texts, things got even more complicated. My wife and I decided to change her number again, just to be safe. We also started looking for a new babysitter for our daughter, which was a tough decision because my mom has been so involved in her life. But we felt it was necessary given the circumstances. A few days later, my brother John called me out of the blue. He sounded really stressed and asked if we could meet up. I agreed, thinking maybe he wanted to talk about the divorce or the kids. When we met, he looked exhausted. He told me that Jen had been making his life a living hell, even more so than usual. She was threatening to take full custody of the kids and was using every dirty trick in the book to make him look like an unfit father. John was desperate and asked if I could testify on his behalf, given all the things Jen had done to our family. I was torn. On one hand, I wanted to help my brother and protect my nieces and nephews from Jen's toxic behavior. On the other hand, getting involved in their legal battle felt like stepping into a minefield. But before I could make a decision, something else happened that changed everything. My wife received a letter in the mail, and it was from Jen. It was a long, rambling letter filled with accusations and threats. She claimed that if we didn't back off and stop interfering in her life, she would release some damaging information about our family. We had no idea what she was talking about, but the threat was enough to make us nervous. We decided to take the letter to a lawyer to see what our options were. The lawyer advised us to document everything and to be very careful about how we interacted with Jen. He also suggested that we might want to consider a restraining order if things escalated. This was all very overwhelming, and it felt like we were constantly looking over our shoulders. Meanwhile, my mom was still trying to play problem solver. She called me again asking if I could just talk to Jen and try to smooth things over. I was furious. How could she still be defending Jen after everything that had happened? I told her that I was done trying to make peace and that my priority was protecting my family. Then, out of nowhere, Jen showed up at my workplace. She caused a scene, yelling and making all sorts of accusations. My boss had to call security to escort her out. This was the last straw for me. I decided to file for a restraining order against her, not just for my wife and me, but also for our daughter. We couldn't take any more chances. The court date for the restraining order was set, and we were all on edge leading up to it. John was supportive and even offered to testify about Jen's behavior. But then, something unexpected happened. My mom called me in tears. She said that Jen had shown up at her house, threatening to take the kids away if she didn't convince me to drop the restraining order. My mom was scared and didn't know what to do. I felt terrible for my mom, but I knew we had to go through with it. The court date arrived and we presented all our evidence. Jen, of course, denied everything and tried to make us look like the bad guys. The judge seemed to see through her act, but then Jen dropped the news. She claimed that she had evidence of my brother engaging in illegal activities and that she would go public with it if the restraining order was granted. This was a huge risk. If Jen was bluffing, we could call her out and get the restraining order. But if she wasn't, it could ruin John's life and possibly affect our entire family. We had to make a quick decision. After a tense discussion with our lawyer, we decided to take the risk and go ahead with the restraining order. Unfortunately, the judge decided to grant the restraining order, and Jen made good on her threat. She released a video that appeared to show John involved in some shady dealings. It went viral, and the fallout was immediate. John was suspended from his job pending an investigation, and the media was all over our family. It was a nightmare. My mom was devastated, and my dad was furious. They couldn't believe that Jen would go to such lengths to hurt us. John was a wreck, and I felt guilty for pushing for the restraining order. My wife and I tried to stay strong, but the stress was taking its toll on us too. In the midst of all this chaos, I started to think back to when John and Jen first got together. I remembered how happy he seemed at first, and how quickly things went downhill. There were red flags from the beginning, but John ignored them because he was in love. I also thought about my own relationship with my wife and how grateful I was to have someone who truly cared about me. As for Jen, I started to see her in a different light. I realized that her behavior was driven by deep-seated insecurities and a need for control. She lashed out at others because she couldn't deal with her own issues. It didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me understand why she was the way she was. In the end, we were left to pick up the pieces. John was fighting to clear his name, and my parents were trying to support him while dealing with their own emotions. My wife and I were focused on protecting our daughter and trying to find some sense of normalcy. It was a tough time for all of us, but we were determined to get through it together. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.